Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, and now we're live. Great. Hello. It's iBookBinding's live stream, and we return after a short break, summer vacation break or whatever, and we're ready to start our new season. And our guest today is Andrew Huot from Big River Bindery. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. Andrew is from Toronto, or as we discussed right before the stream, from Toronto area.
Mhm.
So the first guest from Canada on our podcast or live stream. So that's a great thing to have and to do. Thanks for being with us today, Andrew. My co-host is, as usual, Pavel Voronin. He joins us from Belgrade, from Serbia. And I'm Stepan Chizhov. I'm in Windsor, England. So, yeah. And today we'll be talking about bookbinding, book conservation, moving your workshop, tools, well, everything. Teaching bookbinding as well. So, lots of things. And as usual, if you have any questions, please post them in under the video, either on Facebook, on YouTube, where you watch it. If you are ready to tell us from where you are joining this live stream, please tell us. It's always interesting and fun to see from which country, from which city or town viewers are joining us. And yeah, just join the conversation. So, Andrew, let's start with a little introduction, as it's usual for our live streams. How did you end up, making books and repairing books and conserving books?
Yeah, so I started many years ago as in my undergraduate, I was a printmaking and photography major, and a friend of mine recommended a workshop, and I didn't really know a whole lot about it, but it was for making artist books. And Logan L. Press, which was at Ohio State University, I believe, had a kind of a workshop where they would make these deluxe editions where they'd bring together artists, printmakers, designers, paper makers to make these deluxe books. And I just really fell in love with it. There was enough craft that it seemed really similar to the photography and printmaking. I loved the format of the book. I've always been a big reader. And so I just really kind of turned my artistic practice in that direction. I started collecting equipment, letterpress printing equipment, and bookbinding equipment, and I started taking community classes right after I graduated, and just kind of kept going in that direction. I was lucky enough to spend a couple of years working with Tim Ely, who's a book artist who used to be in Portland, Oregon at that time, but is now in Eastern Washington. And just really continued to love to make artist books. While I was doing that, friends and family found out that I was working on books, whatever that meant. And friends' family Bibles started showing up, and them asking me if I could figure out what to do. And so I did my best on a few things, and then I started to work with a binder and a repair person in town, kind of learning the techniques they did. Around the same time, I joined the Guild of Bookworkers and went to lots of workshops and conferences, and just kind of kept going from there. I'd been working in the field in conservation for a while, and then eventually went back and got a master's of book arts from the University of the Arts, which was a college in Philadelphia that E.D. Kyle, amongst others, taught at. And
Do they still have a book arts program, or?
unfortunately, the university has closed. It was very sad news that I think between the pandemic and probably some poor choices by the administration, the school just recently shuttered. So it's made a number of us in the field quite sad, remembering what we were able to do there. So one less program for people to apply to now.
Yeah, that's
And
sad.
there weren't that many to start with. Yeah. So every single one counts. Yeah.
Absolutely. So But after school, I got a time as a full-time conservator for a university in the Midwest, and have continued to do kind of binding and artist books. I have a full letterpress shop for doing my artist books and for doing prints, and then the conservation work.
Okay, interesting.
And how many years
for that
would that
introduction.
be in total?
I will say again.
And how many years would that be in total? That sounds like a lot and lots and lots and lots.
Many. I started in the 90s, in the mid 90s, starting taking classes and stuff. So it's been a while. And when you see the shop, you'll see how much equipment I've accumulated over those years.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to address some technical stuff just briefly, because we have some issues with. It seems that we had at least had some issues with YouTube, and there were some delays there. Pavel posted about that. There may be some buffering during the stream. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening. It should be fine, but yeah, sometimes it just happens. And as we have a bit of a pause here, I wanted to read some comments, because some of the viewers posted stuff. So Ben Dennison, hey from Dallas, Texas. Roberto Lavadour, good morning from Pendleton, Oregon. Marilyn Moore, hi from Eugene, Oregon. Elizabeth Westland, hi from Sweden. Jean Kannenberg, hi Professor Huot. Jean from Evanston, Illinois, USA. Robin Smith from Knoxville, Tennessee. So Gerald Schulze from Detroit. Lots of people, mostly from the US, but well, from Sweden as well. Maybe some other people will join us or tell us from where they are joining. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions during the stream, just post them and we will pass them to Andrew as soon as it is possible. And well, hopefully Andrew will be able to answer these questions. If you have any questions to Pavel and I, you can also, ask these questions. But firstly, of course, to our guest. Yeah, we announced this stream sort of with intent to talk about moving shops, because well, that's something that happened to you, and happened to you much drastically compared to Tom McEwen, with whom we talked a few weeks ago, and he moved like next door from one studio, literally next door. So for you, it was a different experience. Could you please just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I recently calculated that some of my equipment has traveled over 3,000 miles at this point. So
like in total.
in total. So so I had home studios in Portland. I had a small studio in my home in Philadelphia when I was there. And then I brought together kind of all my equipment in Illinois when I was the conservator. And from there, I went to Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, that's where I opened my own shop and went full-time as a working bookbinder and conservator. And then to Atlanta, Georgia, and then most recently here to Toronto. So I've gotten lots of practice moving lots of heavy stuff and figuring out how to disassemble stuff just enough to get through the door. But yeah, I have not always been able to afford quality riggers or machine movers to do all this stuff. So I've started to collect all the equipment that I need from dollies and Johnson bars and all sorts of different kind of levers and other things to get things up and get them moving. For the most part, I usually drive it myself, usually filling up U-Hauls, have run through a number of moving companies at this point who probably don't ever want to call me back. Loaded and unloaded all this stuff.
Yeah. I can probably compete with you as on the metrics of how far some of my equipment moved, because I have so in my Moscow workshop I had 4 workbenches that I made myself for my bookbinding workshop, and Two of them I sold, but two of them I took with me, and they traveled with me from Moscow to the Netherlands, from Netherlands to Paris, to France, from France to England. So probably it can be at least comparable. Yeah, but I definitely don't have probably don't have as much equipment, and it shouldn't be that heavy because, well, you have some impressive heavy equipment there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I wanted to ask. Stepan just mentioned that he moved from one country to another and then to a third one, and in that case, it was mm, uh, a significant move, not just in terms of distance, but also in terms of jurisdiction, because Russia is outside of European Union, and so is UK
United Kingdom. Yeah.
nowadays. Yes. Um, uh, so compared to your previous moves inside US, were there any additional considerations for you to move to Canada?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from the Toronto area. And so actually, I went as a child and ended up in the US with my parents, never thinking I'd ever come back. And so it wasn't until my wife heard about and then accepted a job at the University of Toronto at one of the libraries that I considered moving the shop again. And so in many ways, it was easy for me to return to Canada. I'd been away far enough that I could load up all my personal possessions and bring it across the border. My family moved actually ahead of me by about 6 months, and some very helpful friends helped me get by for a little while I was closing up the business. So technically, I closed the business in the U.S. and that's gone. And then all my personal possessions, which happens to be big heavy equipment, came across the border with me as my personal possessions. So I bought much of this stuff before I was ever a business as well. So it just worked out that way. I had to do two loads. I had a 15-foot truck and a 26-foot truck, both of which were pretty full, that I had to take across. And I had to do a lot of research to make sure everything was on the up and up, and that I could get it all across without too much trouble.
Yeah, that's definitely a consideration. It's so much easier when somebody is helping you, but when you have to do all the research on your own, that's a tough task. Yeah, I just had a question and it absolutely jumped out of my head. Yeah, it will return to me. It's just
Well,
an issue of having a break after returning after a break. It's always troublesome. Um,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, not a question really. Yeah, I remember what I was sort of fixated on because you mentioned that you had to cancel you close your business in the U.S. and reopen it in Canada, and that's something that happens when you move countries, especially if you don't need your previous business. And sort of what happened to me as well, because well, I had businesses in the Netherlands and in France, and now in England, and which is easier to manage and to open, and how does it work? It may be not directly related to bookbinding, but still I'm quite interested how US compares to Canada.
You know, I started out as a sole proprietor, just an individual running a business, both in the US and here. And in the US, when I started taking kind of more and more expensive and complicated conservation work, I realized that it was better to become an LLC, or a separate entity, to cover myself and for protection and for some tax breaks and things.
Yeah.
And so I was actually quite surprised when I came to Canada in that there's no kind of middle ground. So either you're a sole proprietor or you have a full-on corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of paperwork and fees and materials that go into having a corporation. So at the moment, I'm still just a sole proprietor, just running my business kind of with a business name just
Mm-hmm.
under myself.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, once I figured out the differences and what I needed to do. So luckily I found a number of kind of online classes and things where I could ask about kind of doing artwork or doing business in Canada. So I kind of figured out kind of, all the forms are named different and all the kind
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
procedures.
yeah.
So once I got that all figured out, it wasn't a problem at all. So
Good, good, great to hear. And just to be on the safe side of things, we're not giving any legal advice here. It's just
no,
personal
yeah.
experience, nothing like that. You mentioned family Bibles and stuff, and I guess that's something that many bookbinders who start to work with repairs experience in their work. Do you have any favorite sort of types of book objects you prefer to work with?
I'm pretty happy working on family Bibles. The materials aren't always the easiest to work with, but um, uh, I mostly work with individuals. I occasionally work for institutions, but for the individuals, that's kind of one of the main books that people will bring in. I get cookbooks, I get children's books, often things that are being passed down, and lots of Bibles, as well as book collections and other things. But yeah, the Bibles, kind of, I've made my peace with doing them, knowing what kind of challenges there are going to be and what materials I'm going to have to deal with. So those are pretty nice. I'm always interested in kind of earlier bindings. 19th and 20th century really is kind of the bread and butter of the work that I do. So I like it if I get a book that's a little bit earlier with a little bit nicer paper, a little more interesting kind of structure to figure out and get back together. So I haven't had a chance to do any here, but when I was in Atlanta, I did a fair number of projects for the movie industry. And so those were always a little bit stressful, but a lot of fun to kind of make something happen.
Mock-ups or stuff like that, or
No, props. Yeah, props that went into the movie.
yeah.
So so they always wanted stuff right away, but luckily you got to charge plenty of fresh charges on it. And yeah, it was always they had some wacky requests that you had to try and figure out how to do kind of in the amount of time that they gave you.
We've been trying to arrange a talk with people from River Bindery here in London for quite some time, and they worked on props for Harry Potter and quite a few other entertaining movies. So that there would be a lot of things to discuss besides fine binding and running a bindery as a business. But yeah, it's always interesting to talk about props. But the other thing I wanted to ask you is, considering your moves and the fact that you sort of have a name for quite some time already, do you mostly work with local customers nowadays, or you have customers all over I don't know, the North America, or do the customers follow you as you move? How does it work for you?
Right. Mostly I've worked with the individuals. I've mostly worked with people who are in my area. I often find that people want, especially if it's, kind of a treasured family item, they want to see who's going to work on it. And they want to see where it's going to happen and kind of, be assured that this is an actual place and they're just not sending their book off into the void. So mostly it's been individuals in the area. I get a few things from kind of across Canada at this point as my name's getting out. And I've done some work for artists who are not necessarily in the area, who are looking for someone to do a binding project, who may have come up with the idea but don't want to go through all the work of doing the edition themselves. But yeah, lots of local people who either drop by or call up and want to come by and show me a book.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you. Surely where you moved, there already are some bookbinders. How do you choose a place? Do you look up your colleagues before you move? Because it's always a risk, isn't it?
You know, it was interesting because in Atlanta, I was kind of the only person out there in private practice, which is kind of shocking for a city that size.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and so I got a couple of mentions in the paper, and I just was flooded with work for a few years there. Yeah, here in Toronto, there are a number of people who've been in the city and been in the field for years and years. So they were all quite welcoming. It was great. They were happy. A number of them were kind of getting up there in years, and we're happy to have kind of other people to pick up some of the slack. My background's in conservation, and a lot of those folks might term themselves as a bookbinder or restorer. So depending on kind of what kind of bent people are looking for, what kind of qualifications, that's made me a little bit separate. I ended up on the east side of Toronto just because that's where we ended up getting a house, and I didn't want to drive too far or too long to get to the shop. Toronto has horrible traffic, and as with many of the cities I've lived in recently. And so, yeah, it just made sense to be on this side of town. And so a number of the binders in town are kind of more established and ended up on the west side. And so it's worked out just fine. So I didn't purposely avoid them, but just by chance it ended up in a different neighborhood.
It's great to hear that you were welcomed. When we moved to the Netherlands and we settled in Leiden, there was another bindery there, and I didn't plan to bind books because I was already focused on making tools and stuff. But when we were introduced to each other, the owner of this bindery, they were a bit cautious about the fact that I've been teaching bookbinding for some time, and they were like, "Are you planning to teach? There is not much, market for teaching. There are less and less students every year." And I was like, "Don't worry, I'll be making tools. I'll focus on that. I don't have time for anything else." But it's interesting how it can work out in the end.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. Well, it's interesting here in Canada, there's the Canadian Bookbinders and Book Artists Guild, Cabbage, and they've been around for a long time. And I do some teaching for myself out of my shop. I do some teaching for them as well. Again, they've been really great to work with, and I just try not to overlap the types of things I do for them and I do for myself. And there's lots of kind of local arts organizations and universities that I'm getting to do some. So I think that there's plenty of room. I hope that there's more bookbinders coming up in the world. But it's worked out, quite well. Again, everyone's really been great to work with and accommodating when I need to do things kind of for myself rather than for them.
Talking about teaching and studying, I understand that Canada is a huge country, and there are differences between different provinces in Canada. But how easy is it for a person to start studying bookbinding in Canada? Are there any long-term programs, or it's only courses? How does it work?
So Cabbage probably has the longest continuing set of courses at this time. They're run out of kind of different regional chapters, often run them. They have a series kind of bookbinding 1, 2, 3, where they go from the start through case binding, through some leather, through full leather. So they've had a long history of kind of ongoing courses. They've moved a little bit online, so their intro class is now online as well. But
COVID made us all move online.
Yeah. So, although it's pretty funny because Cabbage came out with a videotape series many, many moons ago, and I remember how innovative it sounded at the time. Yeah. So they've kind of updated it and brought it up with a lot more kind of feedback and, like we're able to do with Zoom and things.
Yeah.
There have been some full-time bookbinding courses, but that kind of came and went long ago. The thing I find really interesting is that there's no full-time, there's no bookbinding component to the conservation schools up here. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of diploma programs and the master's in conservation, which covers paper, but hasn't really covered book conservation so much. So, you know, a lot of people kind of get that and kind of fill in with additional training after their degree. But yeah, there really isn't a good kind of full-time bookbinding course going on anywhere at the moment.
It's always interesting how it works out in different countries and different regions. Because, for example, we had a guest from Armenia a while ago, and we discussed Armenian calligraphy and the history of Armenian writing and all of that. And it appears that in Armenia, in Yerevan, there is conservation education. There are higher education universities that study conservation of different objects, but not books. So people from Armenia had to go to Europe to study book conservation, and that's sad because, well, there is a huge tradition of making books and or working with books. But yeah, maybe in the future there will be something. And what about you? What about your classes and your teaching? Do you have any preferences? Do you teach kids? Do you teach only adults? What's your
yeah,
style?
for the most part, I teach adults. Yeah, whether it was COVID or before that, I figured out that working with kids wasn't my forte. Yeah, so I teach adults. In my shop, I'll teach folks who take everything from kind of just an intro course just to kind of get their hands busy, see if they like it, to conservation courses where we spend 2 or 3 days kind of taking apart books and putting them together. I do a lot of historic bindings. I do kind of try to mix up the different stuff to catch different people. Again, through Cabbage, I do lots of short courses, mostly online courses, because it fits with my schedule best. I can do those midweek and just kind of jump on and teach that. There are some programs here that kind of touch on book history. And so I'm actually getting ready to teach a class for one of the colleges, St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto, where we're going to be doing some bookbinding and book history combined together as part of their course. And so that'll be fun. I've done some, you know, the Art College in Toronto, Ontario College of Art and Design has bookbinding courses. Often they're taught by George Walker, who's an engraver and a book artist here, who's been at the university for a long time, but I've been pulled in to add some extra courses for that as well. So yeah, you know, I think there's opportunity, and I think it's just getting people to kind of know it's out there or to capture it.
Yeah, we've been talking with some of the British bookbinders about bookbinding programs in different places in colleges and separate from colleges, and it's a bit sad that in the UK there are no full-time programs and nothing like that left, because there is a huge tradition of bookbinding. There are plenty of amazing bookbinders here, and we talked with Kate Holland a couple of times about that, and I think there are some things changing there. With Kate did a lot of work to change some of the things, and some of her colleagues as well, and I think there should be at least some programs starting soon or something like that. So hopefully things will change, but we'll see. I hope we will have Kate on our live stream at some moment this fall, or maybe during this winter, to talk about more fine binding and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's hard here in the States because basically you have North Bennett Street School, which is a 2-year full-time program, and then American Academy of Bookbinding, and then other folks do kind of occasional classes that might touch on it. Karen Hanmer has been doing lots of online classes on kind of traditional techniques, but it's often hard to find those core classes or those more advanced classes just in any city, even in the States.
And even with these limited choices, US is faring much better than many other countries. I remember when I still lived in Moscow. I started teaching bookbinding in 2014, and I realized that I myself need to study a little bit to be more sure that I'm teaching the right thing. So I went to the American Academy of Bookbinding, but before that I did my research. I looked for programs in continental Europe and in the UK and in Moscow as well, and everything appeared more expensive than to go to the US, to Colorado, to the American Academy of Bookbinding and study there for a month, than to study locally or whatever. And in Moscow is my guess was that the school, the bindery that was the most active and offering the most courses, they were used to working with the government institutions like libraries and stuff. So they were sure that they can set the price tag at a quite high level and not to care about individuals who want to study. So yeah, but it was a fun experience in any case. I'd read a
Sorry,
bit. Yeah,
I,
sure.
Sir, I wanted to ask Andrew, do you think there needs to be a dedicated a program for bookbinding that lasts for many years? Because some of our guests say that it's normal to get this kind of education on the job and then to apply and go to workshops and specific courses dedicated to details. Or do you think there still need to be a traditional path?
I even if it's something like the American Academy where they have week-long courses and they have kind of a complete set, I think that would be great. I love doing this stuff, so I would be happy to see that happen. It's just trying to figure out if there's the right kind of funding, whether it be donors or enough students or whatever, to make it happen. I don't think that here in Canada, our population is much smaller, so there's much less demand, I think. And so, yeah, it would be great. I would love that. But I don't have high hopes of, any really full-time program happening anytime soon, especially up here. Yeah, if someone wanted to fund it and make it happen, that I'd be happy to cheer them on. But unfortunately, I don't see it happening soon.
Would be nice. Well, we'll continue to to make our small input. Maybe that will bring somebody to sponsoring some programs or something like that in the future. We'll hope for that. I will read a couple more comments, and Andrew prepared some stuff to show us, some objects, some projects, and I think we can switch to that. And again, if any of our viewers will have any questions about these projects or anything else, please post your comments and we will pass your questions to Andrew. Not necessarily questions, but we can just pass your comments. So Kevin Laubacher, how Andrew, long time. Is it Laubacher or Laubach? Sorry, I may butcher some of the surnames. Jane Gutteridge from Toronto joined us. Then who else? Spike Nancy Minogue. Hi, Andrew from Cabbage, Ottawa Valley. Virginia Green, great to see you. Andrew from Robinson, Texas. Marie Trottier from Quebec. And I don't remember if I read it already. Robin Smith. Yeah, I think I read it from Knoxville, Tennessee. And Ben Dennison has a longer comment there. Novice here, started late in life at 58, but fascinated and looking for everything and anything and everything I can get my hands on to learn more and gain skills. Well, as we talked with, as we discussed before with quite a few bookbinders, it's never late to start making books. And we had a couple of guests who started making books when they were pensioners already, and some of them already got some awards from designer bookbinders or whatever. So it's definitely never late, and it's great that you started this learning this new craft, Ben. So, and nice to have you here. And another one from Roberto Lavadour. Those of us who work more in the areas of artists' books and design, and design bindings, are continually having friends and community members bring us books they hope to get repaired. I try to educate them about the specificity of restoration conservation work, but sometimes get roped into doing small jobs. At what price point is it worth your time to get a referral? That's a great question. And I will insert something else into this question, because we discussed this difference between bookbinding, book repairs, book restoration, book conservation on our podcast and our live stream quite a few times with different people who associate themselves with these types of craft or work. And if you're interested, just look at our YouTube channel, search book conservation and book repairs and book restoration, and you will find a few interesting talks. So that's something for you. But Andrew, there was an interesting question there. Should I reread it, or did you get it fine?
Why don't you say what question you're thinking of? There's a...
Yeah. So from Roberto Lavadour, those of us who work more in the areas of artists' books and design bindings are continually having friends and community members bring us books they hope to get repaired. I try to educate them about the specificity of restoration and conservation work, but sometimes get roped into doing small jobs. At what price point is it worth your time to get a referral? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, here in Toronto, I have a separate shop away from my home. So I have a fair amount of overhead that I need to cover between kind of internet and electricity and all the other stuff, as well as the rent.
Well, rent as well.
Yeah. So, so I have a much higher price point than I might have at one time. It really depends kind of how much you care about doing the project. If someone walks in the door and they have something, I'm going to set whatever price I think is, would compensate me enough for the work done. And it's often more expensive than they're willing to do. I always tell clients that, look, unless it's an important actual object, like, you're going to do much better by going on the used market and finding a book. So, I just try to price things at a point where I can kind of cover my time and my overhead and materials, and make sure that I feel good about it at the end of the day. There's nothing worse than doing a project for $20 that takes you 2.5 days. So, it's hard with friends, trying to decide exactly, if you want to give them a discount or what kind of discount that would be. Kind of letting them know what the full amount might be and how much you want to give them a discount because they're a friend. Then that kind of lays it out and educates everyone as to kind of how much time and effort goes into doing these things. And it kind of depends on what city you're like. If there are a bunch of bookbinders, then maybe it's easier for them to go to someone else that's cheaper, or you need to price yourself kind of appropriately for everyone else, as long as they're all on the same playing field. So it's a tricky thing working for friends. So I try to think about those things.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned that you yourself also should feel good after accepting this order. It doesn't matter really from friends or not from friends, but still you have to enjoy your work. And I had a couple of experiences where friends brought to me some stuff, and I gave them the price, and they were like, but it's like, I can buy the same book for a fraction of this price. And my answer always was, well, you can, but if this book has a sentimental value for you and you want to have this exact copy in good condition, then well, you have to pay what my work costs, and I have to spend time on that. But then at some moment I stopped doing any book restoration work at all, because for me it always was hard to negotiate the price, and for book bindings it was for some reasons so much easier, maybe because it's easier to calculate the time spent. And I had this project which I set the price like at the lowest level, because it was for a friend of a friend, and it was a valued book and whatever, and I spent something like 100 hours on it. And in the end I told them that I wouldn't take any money from them, because the price that I asked initially was like a fraction of what should have been paid, and I wasn't just ready to, you know, to value my work so cheaply. So yeah, it's really hard to price your work sometimes, but all of these things should be considered: work, material, time, and your own happiness, of course, which is hardest to measure probably. So, would you show us some of your current, recent projects? What did you prepare for us?
Well, I have a couple of things. Some stuff's out at the moment. I have a stack of books that are in process right now.
Yeah.
Again, kind of the bread and butter is kind of repair and conservation work. And so I have this set of books come in that needed new spines. So on the inside, I did some paper repair. I added some new hinges and have reattached the board. So I cleaned and relined the spine. So each of these are ready for me to pick or tone some Japanese tissue to make a new spine on the outside. This one, I did a cleaning. Again, I have a hinge in here, and I've reattached the boards, but it's a recase, so the case was in good enough shape that I'm able. So I'll get this hinge down, and then I'll get the tissue hinge down to cover up the joints. So this is a lot of what I do. Kind of spine replacement is really kind of one of the weakest areas, or one of the most broken areas that I come across. And so between paper repair and spine replacements, that takes up much of my day. Yeah, so kind of this is just the stack that's waiting for the next step. So that's just kind of a variety of things that we have on the bench. I'm looking to see if I have anything different. But when I have time, I try to do my own artist books. And so here is a small case-bound book. This is a photographic book that I did. And so it has a little text about kind of me in the mornings walking my dog. And then I have a series of photographs. Observations along the way, kind of the different sites that I see. So a lot of my artist books kind of deal with place, and kind of environment and where I am. And so that just kind of continues on. I do photographing printed work sometimes. More often I do letterpress and relief printing for my books. So here's just one of them.
It somehow reminded me, we had Brenda Gallagher, my fellow student and now teacher at the American Academy of Bookbinding, on our live stream, and she made for her husband a binding dedicated to bread bag ties, not ties, but you know, that clips that and then it's always interesting to see different functional objects turned into art or into some creative ideas, and it's sort of your book reminded me of that project of Brenda made for her husband.
Mhm.
And also books are ideal for revealing beauty in a repetitive process. Like here, you walk from a place to a place, and they are in a way the same and in a way different. And when you turn the page, I really like that kind of art.
Yeah, yeah. So I have another artist book here. So called Navigation. It's an accordion book. Let's see if we can do this from the camera. So it starts with a list of city names, and then I'm not sure if you're getting
And
the light
yeah,
there.
it's punctured. Yeah.
But so you have kind of all these images, which if the light's right, you can kind of see the white background behind it.
Yeah.
So it kind of looks like these constellations or these patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a book that I did as I was once again moving and thinking about where I was going. I found out that in the US, there are more than 50 Springfields, which is the name of the town. And there's only 50 states. So I became fascinated with kind of place names that happen multiple times. And so each of these openings is actually a mapping of all the locations of the city by the same name.
Okay. Interesting.
So they're kind of a constellation in a different way. And so these were all places that either I or my wife was applying for jobs, and it really didn't matter what city we ended up in. It was just one of these locations. And so I love accordion books because they kind of display so nicely. This one opens up to about 8 feet long if I open it up entirely, which doesn't have. So, but
Yeah.
again, some press printing, kind of a variation of a carousel book format, where I have the multiple layers that are attached together. And again, kind of playing with place and time and kind of what's going on with me. I have another one here. This one is well loved by a good friend of mine here. Here in Toronto, we have the Japanese paper place, paper supplier and an importer, and Nancy Jacoby, who runs it. I use some of her paper in it, and she just loves this book. So if you can see it, so there's an inset map on the front.
Is it some metallic finish, or is it silk? What's the material for the cover?
It's a silk Japanese cloth
Okay.
for the out. And so as I open it, so it's called Walks with Rosie. And as we go through, see if I can get a good angle.
So it's literally walks.
It's literally walks. This happened in the city of Philadelphia. I printed this on a Sakishu because the kind of the feel of the paper and the translucency, where you could see what was happening before and after. So we have these lines and these colored dots that happen in different locations. There's kind of a key down at the bottom with days of the week.
Oh, okay.
And times the. So kind of more and more of those repetitive patterns. And then when we finally get to the end, the colophon kind of explains what all these activities were.
Nice.
I knew it. I knew it.
So Rosie was my dog at the time, and as I was taking Rosie around the neighborhood, she was having all sorts of adventures, good and bad. So yeah, so that was the tracking of what I did. So I have some more artist books that are kind of in production. I'm not quite there yet. But while I'm working, when I don't have time, I like to participate in collaborative projects. So when I was in the US, I was a happy member of the Guild of Bookworkers. And this was a collaborative project that was done through the Delaware Valley chapter. They're a really active chapter and have exhibits and things going on. So this is called Bird in Hand, and each of the members did a different bird. And so each page is a different print. So all the members artwork based on whatever their bird was. And then the pages got exchanged or distributed to each other. So
Okay.
and then everyone did their own binding at the end. And so I really love this because kind of the, you know, it takes a little bit of work, but you know, it's not kind of as high risk as doing a full artist book might be. And so I've done a number of these collaborative projects, and then it finished it up. So once everyone gets their book or their set of pages, they then make their own binding for it. And so this was a number of years ago, and it was on exhibit. So with both the prints and the bindings, which was a lot of fun.
And which print is yours?
Well, I had just moved to Georgia at the time, and the state bird is the brown thrasher. So this was a reduction linoleum print. Today, I did add the yellow eye at the end because I couldn't figure out how to get that all to work. So.
Okay, beautiful.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. So Delaware Valley, a number of the chapters for the Guild has done this. Delaware Valley does a fair amount. I've done them with the Southeast chapter when I was in Atlanta as well. And I just recently worked on a project with the Canadian Bookbinders Guild, where we did a similar thing, where everyone did a print or some sort of artwork that could be folded and then made into a book. And so it's just been taken down, but it was at the E.J. Pratt Library, which is at the University of Victoria at University of Toronto. And we had a really great show. So hopefully we'll do more of that up here in Canada. So another example of one of these, this was the one that I did in the Southwest or the Southeast. The theme was called Cause and Effect. And so I have this lovely paste paper. And then, so it's a French door. And this is done as a drum leaf binding. So again, an adhesive binding. And then each of the people's prints. And so I love the idea of this format because you can kind of read it piece by piece, or you can kind of mix and match, determining which ones you want together. So I love these because you get to kind of flex yourself in the image making and then in the binding itself. So you end up with all this material and you have to think of what binding or what project you want to do to make it all work and to make it make sense. And so I'm fine ahead with the cause and the effect.
Do you like taking part into any sorts of competitions, or that's not for you?
I have done in the past. Since I keep starting my business up again, I don't really have the type of time that I want to devote. But I'm hopefully things will settle down quicker here, and so I can start working on that. But yeah, I've been part of the Guild of Bookworkers kind of traveling show that's gone around. And so hopefully I'll get back in the game and do more.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's nice here in Canada is we have a lot of sales fairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one coming up. The Fisher Library, which is our big rare book library at University of Toronto, has a small and fine press fair. So I'm going to be going to that, and I'm in the process of making some new work for that. Coming up soon is also the Howard Ironworks Print Expo. So it's a printing museum that's on the far west side of Toronto, but they have a number of vendors who come and make work, both printmaking as well as kind of book arts. And so that's going to be coming up at the end of September. So yeah, there's a lot more kind of fairs and activities happening here than I was used to in the States. So that's a nice kind of trade-off for some of the regular stuff that I was used to.
Interesting. I understand that that's probably a question we should address to somebody from either American Guild of Bookworkers or Canadian Guild. But is there any collaboration between the guilds? Do you know anything about that? How does it work? Or they're mostly working within the countries and that's it?
Yeah, they're mostly separate organizations. There was a joint conference a number of years ago, and I know some folks are interested in trying to do that again. Yeah, there's kind of separate organizations and boards, and they have a slightly different focus. I know with the Guild of Bookworkers, their kind of annual conference is a great activity to bring folks together, as well as the exhibit and the journal and the newsletter and all the other stuff that goes with that. Cabbage doesn't do an annual meeting, so it's much more kind of online and kind of virtual activities. And so, yeah, they just have a different way that they've come with.
Mm-hmm. Pasha, you've been waiting to say something, or?
No. I was mesmerized by the books you were showing, but since you're asking, I was wondering. So, from what I know about Canada, most of the population lives along this strip from in the east, right? And there's also Vancouver in the west, and that's basically it. So from that, well, I know there are other people, yes, but most of the population live there. So probably most of the bookbinders live along this strip where Toronto, Montreal, etc. is. So it's much easier for the Canadian bookbinders to get together and have a fair. So that's probably a big difference with the US, where you can travel for days and get to another big part of country with lots and lots of people. Would
Yeah,
that be
I think there's a lot less people doing it. I think the U.S. the Guild has had kind of it's well over 100 years now, and they've had an annual conference for so many years now that people just know they're going to get enough people to fill the room to make it worthwhile. Yeah, I think that it's still pretty far from Montreal to Toronto, and it's really far to Vancouver. So I think that I don't know if it's not been tried or if they just don't want to kind of organize and then have it fail. But yeah, having kind of the numbers or enough people to kind of book up a conference venue might be a little harder here. One thing I found interesting, especially after living in Georgia, was that the pandemic situation was much more of awareness here in Canada. Things were locked down for much longer. And so I arrived and people were talking about how they're finally getting out of pandemic lockdowns, and coming from the South, where I think many people didn't believe it was a real thing. People were out and about and active much quicker. So things have just taken a little while to kind of build back up. And so hopefully we're getting to a point where people will be willing to kind of go out and get together. And so I've tried to organize some regional activities here in the Toronto area for the members that are here. And I know some of the regional chapters have, kind of get together some workshops and other things. So yeah, I think we're working on it, but I think it's just going to take some time.
Yeah. Well, we hope you will succeed. You and the guild as well, in general, because, well, there are other chapters besides Toronto, of course, and people can make books anywhere and everywhere. Would you be ready to take us for a tour of your workshop?
Sure.
And I'll use this moment to say that again, if anyone has any other questions, please post them, and we will pass them to Andrew. And also, please check the links in the description of the video. There are links to, well, Big River Bindery and Bindery's account on Instagram. Please subscribe to this account, and also you can subscribe to our social accounts and like videos and share and whatever. Do whatever. Andrew, could you please turn the phone vertically when you'll be walking around the studio? Let me see how does it look like. Yeah, it should be better this way. Thank you very much.
Great. Are you ready?
Will you? Yeah, I mean, from where the sound will go, will be loud enough if it goes through your laptop. But
I think so.
Yeah, let's try. Yeah.
No, if not, we'll adjust. So I'm here in Scarborough. I'm in an industrial neighborhood, and so it's kind of auto shops and light industrial stuff. But I found a really great space, I think. Here I have about 1,400 square feet in the shop, which is about the size of the home we're renting right now. So I feel pretty generous with what I'm able to do with the shop. I got a separate space because
sorry, Andrew, 1,400 square feet, it should be something like 120 square meters or something. I think it should be something like that, just for our European viewers. Yeah, sorry.
I haven't made the transition yet from US measurement to Canadian measurement. So when you come in the shop, I have a kind of a full reference library with materials that I look at and refer to. As I come in, I have lots of kind of teaching space. I made sure that I had enough room to teach kind of general workshops. You talked about your benches. I have a number of benches that I had made for me that are a nice height to work at.
Yeah.
And so I had to make them fit through a standard door so I could get them in and out of the shop.
Yeah. And I see that all of them are on wheels. That's something that I never implemented for my benches, and I always was a bit sad about it. I should have done that.
Yeah, I really love kind of how flexible it makes the space that I have.
Yeah.
I have my board shear, so I have a 50-inch board shear.
And that's an old beast, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's a Jacques, but it's one of those from back then. And so I have to disassemble it in order to get it out of the shop, out of the door.
Do you tune it yourself, or do you prefer to, ask somebody else to tune it?
I've had to do it myself for the most part.
Yeah.
I will say that in the past I've had some help from Noah Smuts, who's a conservator in St. Louis, and he does board shear adjustment. So when I was in Atlanta, came and did some adjustments for me and made everything nice and straight.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been into coming up here yet, but we'll see one day. So I have a guillotine, a small guillotine. I have a couple of job backers.
Mm-hmm.
In the back, I have some kind of a stamping area.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the quick print that I've used for the most part for years, and a pencil that I just recently got.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have lots of kind of storage of materials.
Oh, by the way, how do you call these presses on the legs you have on this cabinet on in the right?
Say that again?
You have these small presses on small legs over there on top. Do you have any specific name for this type of presses?
I think they're called repair presses.
Yeah.
Those are made by Tim Moore, who was a paper-making mold and bookbinding tool maker.
Mm-hmm.
Really wonderful presses. He may be retired at this point. I don't remember. But yeah, it's great to have them on the feet so that if I'm cleaning the spine or doing something, it's kind of quick and easy.
Because I got one of these presses from a flea market some time ago, and I never seen a press like that before, and I never knew how they are called. So when I saw them on your cabinet, I was interested right away because, well, an opportunity for me to get some answers. Thank you.
So around the back here, I have my photo dock area.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if I don't have a permanent photo dock area, especially for the conservation, things just pile up too quickly.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to all the bookbinding stuff, I have lots of letterpress.
Yeah.
So I have wood and metal type. So I have kind of a composing area, as well as lots of storage.
This looks great.
I'm always tempted to ask, do you really need so many fonts and types? And how many of them do you actually use?
Well, no, I don't use any of it as much as I'd like to, but sometimes you just need the right fonts. So, it's so much harder with lead type because, if you don't have the right size or the right typeface, it's hard to find when you need it. So I have a couple of flatbed proof presses, kind of like Vandercook's here in the shop. These are two different brands. One's an Asburn and one's a Challenge, but they work essentially the same. So there's kind of a flat bed that the type sits in and gets locked into, and then a roller that goes over the top. As well as kind of all the accompanying stuff that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I get distracted by all the conservation workers waiting for me to.
Yeah, that's life.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's kind of the grand tour. Do you have any questions about any of that?
Well, it's a great space and nicely organized, especially compared to my workshop, which is not organized at all. So I'm always happy to see somebody else's workshop which is well kept and organized, and there is so much interesting stuff there. Thank you for the tour. It's always good to have a tour of some other person's shop, because it always brings some new ideas to implement in your own working environment, even if you have a small corner when you make books or whatever. seeing some ideas of how things can be stored or organized, it's just always beneficial. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem.
And I wanted to say that it's one of the most spacious workshops we've seen. There's lots of space in between benches and everything else. Are you planning to add more stuff, or are you planning to add more people, or do you just like it that way and you're lucky to have such a great space?
Give me a second. Let me turn off this camera and we'll
Yeah.
figure out how to do this. There we go. So, I have been told by my wife many times that I'm a koi, because koi are fish that expand to fill the space they have. So I get more equipment. I'm trying not to do that more than I have to. Mostly it's so that I have enough space to teach and enough space to kind of lay materials out as I'm working. I had about the same size space when I was in Atlanta, just chopped up a little bit more. So this seems kind of nice and open because it's a, one big space. But yeah, I could, it was hard to find space in Toronto that was a somewhat reasonable rate, that was the right size I needed. And so this just ended up the size space that I could have gotten a little bit smaller. But yeah, rents are really horrible here in Toronto, even compared to Atlanta. And so yeah, so I was just happy to find a space that I could fit it all in. And it just takes a little extra work to cover that rent every month.
Do you have any other people working for you? How your process organized from this point of view? Because I'm asking because most of our guests are usually working alone, and we almost always try to ask them if they want to have an apprentice or an employee or something like that. And in many cases, bookbinders answer that if I add an employee, I'll lose all my income right away. And unfortunately, it's not always beneficial because this employee wouldn't bring, in the future, they wouldn't bring enough income to afford them and to continue doing business. And moreover, like they come for 1 year, they learn from me, and then they move on, and I need to look for a new apprentice or employee or whatever. So some of the people are like working years after years thinking about having an employee or an apprentice and never having them. So what's your situation?
So here I just work by myself. I do have an intern that's coming in working with me a little bit, who kind of is doing a lot more kind of letterpress and organization, as well as learning kind of different skills in the shop. While I was in Atlanta, actually around the end of the pandemic there, I got an employee just because I had so much work that I just couldn't keep up with stuff. And that actually worked out quite well. She had interned with me before, so she kind of had good hand skills coming in. And I think she was able to, pay for herself and make it worthwhile. It ended up that I left, and now she's opened up her own shop in Atlanta. So
Good.
it was good to be able to put that on. But yeah, I don't know if I'll do it anytime soon here. Here I do a lot more teaching than I used to, and so I'm kind of in and out, and it's hard to kind of train someone or supervise someone adequately. I don't know that I want to get that big. It was kind of a little bit over the top with so many projects in the shop, kind of weighing me down and making me nervous about getting stuff done. So I'm happy with kind of the level I'm at the moment. I'd like a little more work coming in, but I think that I'm going to try and keep it so that it's just me. So, having an employee, there's lots of kind of extra paperwork and management and other things that I didn't necessarily like anyways. So yeah, so I don't see myself getting anyone anytime soon. I'm always happy to have interns come in because I think that's kind of fun. and it's, kind of feeding back to the community. But yeah, and again, in Toronto, there are other people around. So if I feel like there's too much work, then I can pass things on to the other binders.
How do you look for interns in bookbinding or printing? It's such an obscure, field of work.
I don't know that I look for them, but so this one came from the art college in town, and one of the instructors that I know there said, I have this student who made some books, really interested. And then, kind of we did a trial period, see what it was like, and then we kind of continued on from there. Yeah, I think there's still some students who are interested in this, and if I can make it work out with my time and their schedule and stuff, then yeah, I'm happy to, kind of have stuff. I'll take a little time to teach them things. They can practice, have plenty of scrap material around to work with. So, yeah, I think it's an extension of some of the teaching I do around town.
So when Stepan was talking about how apprentices live in a year or so, I was thinking the best way for that historically was to teach your own son or daughter. And here we have a question from a viewer. Has your son shown interest in learning the trade?
Not really. My son has decided he's going to be a YouTube star. He's only 13, so we'll see if that lasts. But he is much more interested in playing Minecraft and trying to get videos up than helping me in the shop. So when he was much younger, my wife and I would argue. She's a bassoonist and I'm a bookbinder, and we each said that he was going to follow in our footsteps. And then one day he got out a piece of paper and he made himself a little business card for Banana Bookbindery, and I knew that I won. And he was gonna follow in my footsteps. It hasn't happened, but so he still loves to come to the shop and play around and fold paper and do things. So, but I'm not going to get much work out of him anytime soon.
Well, it may happen at any moment. I started making books when I was, what was that, 2006? So I was 24. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sure at some point I'll get him to earn his allowance by helping me out in the shop. So.
Yeah, we have another question from Marie Trottier. Do you get to restore manuscript with iron garlic ink damage?
I haven't run across a whole lot here. I know there's lots of testing and lots of work that's gone on to take care of those the best you can. I don't do a lot of books that are taken apart far enough to do kind of liquid treatments or washing. I can do it, but most of the people who are coming in are working with much more modern materials, so it's a rarity. If I had a project like that, I'd probably work with some of the paper conservators that I know in the city, and I'd take care of the binding stuff and then just farm out some of the chemical.
Do you have some, period or type of binding you'd like to work with? Some sort of professional dream or something like that.
Yeah, well, when I was younger, I did an internship at the Folger Shakespeare Library, which is a Renaissance Washington, D.C., and they had amazing collections to work on. So a lot of kind of 18th, 17th, 16th century materials that were really fun to work on. Lots of parchment and lots of vellum bindings and lots of other things that was coming through the labs. So that stuff's great. The paper's not going to break apart when you treat it like with a 20th century Bible. But yeah, so those were a lot of fun, and I would love to do kind of some of that earlier stuff and figure out the best ways of getting those back together.
Good, interesting. So again, I will ask our viewers if you have any questions left, please post them, because we'll be ending our live stream pretty soon. It's already almost 90 minutes since we started, and I think it was a great talk. Thank you very much for that, Andrew. We'll talk a bit more, of course, because well, we still have some time left. But if you have any questions left, please post them, because that's probably your last opportunity to do that. Again, I will remind everyone that we have lots of interesting links in the description of this video, including our Patreon account, which is well quite crucial for our project, because that's sort of what allows us to pay to our researcher and for any editing job we need to do or anything like that, because well, that's how this live stream and our podcast are funded. So if you have an opportunity, you know, to spare $1 per month, that would be great. At least $1. If more, we would be even more happy about that. But also, please check the links to Big River Bindery and Big River Bindery Instagram account, because well, that's something what you definitely would want to follow, because Andrew posts a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of videos, which is something that happens more and more on Instagram these days. But it's always interesting to see those videos. Pasha, you have another
And
question.
that is exactly what I wanted to ask Andrew about. Why? Why do you spend so much time on it? Is it important for you personally, or for you as a business owner? Because you can tell that you both like it and that it takes a lot of work.
You know, I'm not sure it takes that much work. You know, I know that Instagram likes videos better. You know, it's interesting to see how people do an operation, you know, what kind of steps go into it. I like working in other videos as well to see kind of how things are made. It's just me in the shop, so it's easy enough for me to just set up the camera. I don't do any kind of fancy video work or anything on those. And so they're pretty quick and easy for me to kind of just to throw together. It's good motivation to get started on a project. If I know if I haven't posted recently and I need to get a video up, I might as well get some work done and show what I'm doing in the shop. So, you know, I think it's kind of fun. When during the pandemic, I did a lot of online teaching. So a group of us came together and started what was called Book Paper Threads. So there are 3 instructors who did a lot of online instruction at that time. And so I just got used, you know, I got all the right equipment, and so things are lit fairly well. And it's easy enough for me to throw, you know, a quick time lapse or other video together at this point. So I don't think it's a lot of work. And people seem to like it. So.
Yeah. Do you have any customers coming from Instagram? How does it work for you?
Rarely, you know, lots of likes. Occasionally someone will contact me, but yeah, for the most part, I just think it keeps my mom updated on what I'm doing.
Well, that's also very important. So yeah, it serves its function. Yeah, it's also always interesting to see how this works for different people, because well, I'm sort of a bit outside of bookbinding business, because since we moved to the Netherlands 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. I've made 2 books or something. I just didn't have time for that, unfortunately, because well, as I said, I was focusing on making tools. And for me, Instagram is one of the most important sources of revenue, because lots of people come after seeing my tools in use. But I think that for many bookbinders, Instagram can be their, you know, point of entry for the customers, especially if they make something that's, you know, a bit different, or they focus on something that's a bit different, because that's something that they can show. But unfortunately, not many bookbinders do have nice Instagram accounts. That's why it's even more interesting and I don't know how to say, exciting to see your Instagram account where you say that you don't have it as a serious source of revenue, but still post a lot of interesting stuff. So thanks to you for that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you wanted to say something or no?
you good?
So I guess that's mostly it. We covered lots of things today, and I think it's one of the most well-rounded talks in the past time, because we covered like the beginning, we covered current project. You showed some of the things you're working on now. You showed some of your previous projects. We had a workshop tour, which is always amazing, as I said before, and. We had some interesting questions from the audience as well. That's a great start for a new season for our live stream. It was a great pleasure to have you, Andrew, here on this first live stream of this season, and finally to have you, because we really followed your Instagram account for quite a long time, and we wanted to invite you for quite a long time, and then we invited you, and there were some issues on our side, unfortunately, because it's summer and stuff happens. But yeah, here we are, and thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us for these 90 minutes and for being with us. And if you're watching this in the future, please also leave a comment and subscribe, of course, to our social accounts, to Andrew's social accounts or whatever, and see you next time. We have a couple of streams scheduled. Next week we have a person from Cairo-Geniza research unit to talk about Cairo-Geniza, and they are publishing a new book, sort of. I think it's a coffee table book. That format of book. Pasha, please remind me. I need to send you a digital sampler of this book before we stream. So it should be.
Can't wait. I've heard about this book and seen a few illustrations, and it's gonna be a blast. Yeah,
and it should be an interesting talk, and it's always interesting to talk about book history, and especially such a specific book history. And then we will have Ben Elbel early in September from his new workshop, because he moved to from the Netherlands to France a while ago, but we will be talking about his new tutorial, which will be presented this November in Leiden, as he usually does. And then we have a couple of other guests lined up preliminary, but we'll see how our schedules fit. So there is a lot of interesting stuff prepared for everyone, for us and for our viewers for this fall, and I hope it will go fine. Again, Andrew, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. Let me check if anybody posted anything else. People are saying thanks. What do I have here? Everything works really slow. Elizabeth Paslum, thanks for a great talk. Marilyn Moore, great talk and tour. Marie Trottier, very impressive. And thank you, Roberto Lavador. Great to see you, Andrew. I guess that's it. We'll stay for a bit longer while the stream drops on both platforms, but that's it for today, and see you next week.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
So I need to stop the stream. The Friday Forge, thank you. And stream, where is it?